understand the mystery. First take a look at the history. The words we use will give us clues. So join us now in Church Chatter.
Welcome to the Church Chatter podcast, where we unpack a different church word or phrase each week. I'm Sam. I study language and culture.
And I'm Dillon. I'm an ELCA Lutheran pastor.
And today's episode 55, and it's all about the word testimony. Today's going to be kind of a personal episode. So if you listen to episode 54, it was all about the word witness and what that meant with its Roman context. All kinds of things. You can listen to that episode because it leads into this one. So remember that a testimony, right? A lot of churches use that language. A testimony, somebody's testimony, right? I'll tell you, it's a word that Dillon and I struggle with. And we can get into that a little bit, but we're trying to move beyond it. So in the Roman court, people had to bow down to Caesar, right? So you had at some points in history in the first few centuries, you had these Jesus followers, and I call them Jesus followers because the Christianity didn't exist yet, right? And they were causing trouble because they refused to bow down to Caesar. So they were called into the Roman court to give their testimonies, just like we have today in courts, right? Because we are descendants of Rome still. We have very Roman systems in place. So what's really interesting is, again, this won't make sense if you didn't listen to the witness episode, so please listen to that. But the Romans enforced their truth, right, through violence and spectacle. But what's really interesting is that Jesus was crucified, and that was a path to truth for Jesus followers, right?
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about testimony?
No, I think that's
I have my notes here and I'm trying to stay on track
No, I think that's pretty good.
Right. Let me even say it more clearly. Jesus was killed by the Romans, and the church then later claimed that their suffering at the hands of empire was the ultimate testimony of who they saw as divine, as powerful. Also, I have a new candle. It's lemongrass, which is not the season for it, but I'm a lemon person. It smells so good.
I'm a lemon person too. It's very good.
Okay. I want to talk about Nadia Bolz-Weber. Do you have anything else to say first, though, leading up to testimony?
No, just about, I thought Nadia's, well, you'll explain it, but I thought Nadia's, for a mainline Protestant pastor to share that testimony was very powerful for me.
Yes. Okay. So I'll speak for me, not for Dillon, if you want to jump in. I hate personal testimonies. I don't like them because I think that Christianity has dominant Christianity, I'll say, not all expressions, has really swayed in the direction of religion is for internal and personal transformation. And I think that has a place. I think that there's something true about that, because we all have our inner work to do. But whenever you make Christianity or any religion about just you and your transformation, you're missing the mark. We're going to do an episode soon on the word church, but the early Jesus followers gathered and they found their salvation, which I think we did an episode on that dozens of episodes ago on the word salvation. They found their salvation in each other because Rome said, I'm your savior. You find salvation through us. Turns out they just put their boot on the neck of the first century Jews, right? So these first century Jews and then some Greeks joined later, but they gathered and cared for each other when the Romans couldn't. And that's what church is. You gather and you care for each other, even whenever people you go to church with are difficult. And newsflash, you're difficult too. Even when you're annoyed, I've said it before, I'll say it again, annoyance is the price we pay for community, right? You gather, you take care of each other, you figure out who's in need, and you care for them. Dillon has our dog. So personal testimony to me, I sometimes struggle with it. I always struggle with it because I think it highlights individualism. That's not a value of the early church. That's a value of capitalism and democracy. right? And I think democracy is a great thing. I think capitalism is not a terrible economic system, although we need to address what's happening now with capitalism and unregulated stuff. But anyway, different episode, different time. But those are values of modern economic and political systems, not of the early church and not of Christianity. So I've said my piece. With that being said, I feel like I'm talking a lot. Do you want to talk about what Nadia Bolz-Weber said when we went to her revival, which is crazy that I went to a Christian revival, but I did.
Well, that was
a different kind of thing, but yeah.
A very not very typical Christian revival.
So that about testimonies.
Well, I think it's interesting that what I loved about Nadia Bolz-Weber's testimony. So Nadia Bolz-Weber, for real quick.
Yeah.
So Nadia Bolz-Weber, about 3 weeks ago, almost a month now ago, she's been doing this tour. So Nadia Bolz-Weber is an ELCA Lutheran pastor in one of the Midwest synods out in the Midwest, and she became very popular in that she spoke to topics that most pastors weren't really talking about 10, 15, 20 years ago. And
really quick, she used to be an addict. I wanted to say a quick side note we should have said in the beginning. Dillon and I are not in the same room today. He's downstairs and I'm upstairs. We're talking on Zoom because we're trying it out because we might have guests soon on Zoom. So we're practicing recording on Zoom. So things look a little different today. But yeah, she was an addict. She's been clean for a long time, but go ahead.
Yeah, and so her whole work, her whole ministry was kind of defined and oriented around people who struggle with addiction and dependence, and people who were kind of on the margins, the LGBT community, women who have had to seek reproductive care, single parents, a lot of those groups, and so now what she's doing most days is she's writing books. And she's talking about her experiences that she's had in ministry, and she's going around and she's talking about how can we try to begin a movement of healing, not only in the church but in the world. And so, at Trinity Lutheran Church in Lansdale, she came, and Samantha and I got tickets, and we went to see her. We've read almost all of her books. And it was wonderful. So this is what I liked about Nadia Bolz-Weber. Nadia Bolz-Weber did not grow up in a mainline Protestant church. She grew up very conservative, evangelical. Some people would even say that her denomination is somewhat fundamentalist and literalist. But what she
found refuge in the Lutheran Church.
She found refuge in the Lutheran Church, and but something that she brought from her old tradition was the understanding of singing together, which most Christian traditions do. They sing together, and so she took some of the old songs from her old tradition and merged them with her new understanding of theology in a more mainline Protestant inclusive tradition. And what I loved about that is that I have some of that in my own life. And so I found that I found it actually quite healing for me, because sometimes you think you have to separate the two things. That was a life before, and now this is a new life. And there's a part of that, but it got people energized, and it invited people. Her revival invited people into speaking about their personal faith, which, as a mainline pastor, I can assure you that is not something that is overarching a part of our tradition necessarily.
Well, we have a liturgical church, and the liturgy doesn't always provide space for that. But Nadia, so this whole revival, go ahead.
Oh, just real quick. However, in most mainline Protestant traditions, that is indeed changing. You can see it all over the place. The liturgy is not going away by any means, but there are these little carved out moments in time, maybe consistently, maybe seasonally or quarterly or whatever, but allowing people to come up and talk about, like, why do they give to a community? Why do they find this community uplifting to them to come to weekly and monthly? So it is changing, and it should change. And a personal faith is not a bad thing, but it's not just a personal journey. That's the danger.
Right. I know a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I believe in God and that's enough. I don't have to go to church. And listen, non-church going people, I'm not trying to give shame, but I am saying that church is not nothing. It's part of the whole thing. It's where you get to come into community and wrestle with all of this together. Christianity was never, and Jesus was never about going and doing this rogue thing, right? He had people travel with him for a reason. He didn't just go around. Anyway, so
I just want to state this too, that, and I have nothing against this per se, but I should say not but the teachings of Jesus and the early Jesus communities were not monastic. And what I mean by that is
monolithic?
No. Well, they weren't monolithic either, but they weren't monastic, which means that for the most part, they did not flee outside of things and go off on their own completely and left society. That was not the message of Jesus. The message of Jesus was to bring God's kingdom here on earth and to restore and bring wholeness in community within the place that we're in, which is earth. Not
even Jesus, when Jesus goes off to Gethsemane, because people think he went off on his own, he wasn't alone. I think it was Passover was happening, right? There were people everywhere, right? He needed a break like we all do, but he was not in this, like, I'm by myself in the wilderness. There were people everywhere.
Well, and even when you hear the story, usually in the beginning of Lent, you hear the story about Jesus after his baptism going off into the wilderness, and to fast and pray.
There were people there. He brought someone.
It makes mention that there with him are wild animals and angels. It makes it clear that yes, he was alone, but not completely. He was surrounded by.
I think there's also a line that one of his disciples was with him. No?
That's in one of the Gospels, yes.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So
okay.
So
I don't want to belabor too much.
No, but basically, giving your personal witness or giving your personal story is not a bad thing. It's a very good thing. And having a personal faith is also extremely important and good, but that's not where it stops.
Right.
That's not where it stops.
Right. So the whole point of Nadia Bolz-Weber's, which was really transformative for me, this event that we went to, the whole thing was, I'm just going to be super blunt about it. There is a certain kind of Christian right now that is trying to take over power in the United States. It's called Christian nationalism, specifically white Christian nationalism. It is a problem. It is bad. It is not good, right? Christians shouldn't be trying to gain power. That was never the point. We were supposed to be a third way, a new way, a way almost disinterested in the power and living in our community over here to demonstrate we can do this lovingly, without war, without violence, with a posture of surrender and love. And that's not what's happening in the United States right now. So Nadia Bolz-Weber is doing, it's called the Red State Revival. She's doing it in red states, and Pennsylvania is a swing state. So she came to Pennsylvania and we went to this event. And the whole point was, you bet your bottom dollar that those types of Christians, and I hate to speak so othering like this, but this was the event, and it was very loving. She has a way with words where she wasn't demonizing, but she was saying there's something dangerous happening. And there are people who aren't afraid to talk about their Christianity. So those of us who are like mainline Protestants, who have a more, we don't want power, we don't want Christianity mingling in democracy in that way, or even taking it over, right? we need to go out and start sharing our own personal testimonies. We have to start talking about our faith. And that's difficult for us mainline Protestants because we tend to be more communal than individual, which I will stand by, I think, till the day I die. That's the whole point, right? But we do tend to be more communal than I'm in this for the personal transformation. Although those two things go hand in hand, right? Do you know what I mean? Did I explain that in a way? So
Yes. Let me just, before we tell
well, that's the whole point of today's episode. Dillon and I are going to share our testimonies.
yeah,
We're going to practice out loud. And everybody should go out and practice because people need to know that there's another way to be Christian. And it's not only about wanting power and wanting to control others with our Christianity.
Well, right. But for years and years and years, and even arguably still today, and I still stand by this. I actually don't even know if Samantha, not that we won't agree on it, but if you were to ask a mainline Protestant, so that's like Lutheran, Episcopalian, Methodist, UCC, Presbyterian, Moravian, there's like 7 or 8 groups. And
7 or 8, you don't know the exact number?
Well, no, there is 7, but some say 8 because they lump in the disciples of Christ. So I'm trying to be ecumenical. And so those 7 groups, 8 if you add the disciples of Christ, those groups, along with most Roman Catholics, if you were to ask an individual, what do you believe, or what do you profess, or what do you affirm, they would say, well, I believe, or I confess, or I profess the Apostles' Creed. That's what I believe. And from there, I take action. But what do I believe? That's so most people in those two traditions, Roman Catholicism and mainline Protestantism, their orientation of who they are as a Christian is creedal, and a creed is communal. We say it together, we profess it together, we live it out together. So someone would say, well, what do you believe? Well, that's silly. The church has an understanding of what you believe. For me, you'll hear that a little bit in my own, but
in your own what?
Testimony. However, I will say sometimes if you were to ask a person in one of those two traditions, Catholicism or mainline Protestantism, if someone were to ask them, they would find that a silly question. What do you believe? Well, that, of course.
That's not less than.
No.
For all of known human history, knowledge is communally constructed. Very rarely is somebody going out on their own and saying like, this is what's true. It's oftentimes that's how science works too, by the way, right? Science is a community of people doing studies, coming together, wrestling and saying, oh, we've observed this enough that this must be true. That's how faith works too. That's how every religion works, is this multiple people experiencing things similar, sharing it through testimonies, and then saying, oh, I had a similar experience. There must be truth there. That's what the Bible is, by the way. It's this collection of stories and almost testimonies from people, right? Moses with the burning bush and the going up on the mountain and the tablets, that's a testimony of his experience with God. And then enough people come together and we see these commonalities and we create a religion around it, right? That's how knowledge is constructed. If you are a research person, you can tell that I'm a constructivist. I believe that knowledge is constructed. I don't believe in there's one true way that we can grasp fully. No, we come together and we wrestle with it. That's the point. Anyway, I'm getting very excited.
Well, I'm just saying too, before we start on our thing, to go back to what I said was, the creeds were communally constructive. Are they perfect? Were they perfect? No. But they were communally constructed. They were ideas and beliefs that were taken from the majority of what people thought and believed. There were some things that other people believed that did kind of get stamped out. So there's that. You could talk about all that. But in all of it, it was a communal thing that came together, and it's still a communal thing today. And we both love it and we wrestle with it at the same time. And yet, if someone were to say, "What do you believe?" in our traditions, in the mainline Protestant traditions, it's a little bit less about what you personally believe about Jesus, and it's what the church has been saying about Jesus for over millennia.
Right.
And how you parcel that out in your own personal faith is a personal thing that you do with yourself and the divine. And
And you
so,
can come alongside community and wrestle with it
yeah,
within. Yeah.
okay. So
Can I go first?
you want to go first?
Is that okay?
Oh, sure.
So before I start, so again, we're both going to share our testimonies, our experience, our faith. It's not all encompassing. I'm actually a little congested right now, so bear with me. I first want to have a little side note on privacy and vulnerability. Dillon tends to be more private than I am for whatever reason. We could go into childhood stuff. We won't, but I mean, I'm sure it goes back to childhood somehow. I have absolutely no qualms about bringing my opinions, my stories, my experiences, my thoughts to any room or space or person. I have no issues with having myself fully exposed, with being vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? Dillon tends to be a little more private than I am and not share his own stuff. I am not that way. I tend to think, what are you holding on to your stories for? In 100 people, in 100 years, it's all going to be new people. What does it matter, right? In fact, I don't even understand a way to connect with people if you don't bring your full self forward. There's an emotional intelligence to that. You don't get to just like dump on people like, here's everything. But I never have any qualms about this stuff. So there's that. So if you're somebody who's like, oh, I don't want personal stuff, turn it off now. You can stop watching now. I'm going to tell a story. Jill's going to tell a story. Are you ready, Don?
I am.
Okay, so my testimony, we're using that language, we're trying to get comfortable with it, has a lot to do with achievement and isolation. So I'm going to tell some stories to kind of like have this through line and where God kind of enters the scene throughout here. And for me, God has a lot to do with the church community. So even whenever I talk about the church community, to me, those things are inseparable. So achievement and isolation are two huge issues. Dillon knows this intimately about me. Achievement and isolation are two huge, huge issues. A lot of people have a voice in their head that tells them they're not good enough, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're all these things. I don't have that voice. The voice in my head tells me all day, every day, you are alone. You are all alone in there. Nobody knows you. You are so alone. You're alone, you're alone, you're alone. That's the voice in my head. That's the evil voice in my head that I have to manage and figure out or whatever. So um, when I was writing this, I have this pattern of being an observer, right? So I have this isolation thing, this voice in my head for whatever reason telling me you're all alone, you're born alone, you'll die alone, you're all alone in here. Nobody can touch you, you're all alone. So I'm really trying to stress that, right? And whenever I think about my life, I have two brothers. They are twins. They're identical twins. They're a little younger than me, 2 years younger than me. They literally had their own language, literally, like many twins do. My childhood, a lot of times, was by no one's fault. It's just what happened. My two brothers and then me. I was on the outside looking in. And then elementary school happened. And I remember sitting on the playground, everybody's playing on like the equipment, the slides, the jungle gym. People are playing kickball over here. And there was this little area that had lamb's ear, that plant lamb's ear that's like really soft. And I would sit over there for years in elementary school, recess. I mean, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. I would just sit there and touch this lamb's ear and watch everybody. So just like with my brothers, I would just observe. Teachers tried so hard, like, why don't you come play? I didn't want to. I just wanted to observe. I didn't want to play kickball. I didn't want to go down the slide. I didn't want to walk around on the fun path and do hopscotch. I didn't want to. I just wanted to touch this lamb's ear. Sometimes I'd even rip a piece off and put it in my pocket and like and take it in. I just wanted to observe. And then in elementary school and middle school and high school, I became one person in a close friend group of 3 people. And again, nobody's fault, but those 3 people, inevitably, these 2 are close for a period, and then these 2 are close, and then these 2. And I was on the outside sometimes when the other 2 were hanging out, and I would observe. And I'm sure that other times the 2 of them felt like they were on the outside, right? So again, I just had this pattern. I'm really losing my voice, but can you hear me?
I can. You're coughing a lot, but
So I had this pattern of being on the outside looking in. And then I went to college and I dated a Russian for 4 years. And so all of our friends were Russian. And so it brought me back to my brothers speaking their own language. I was on the outside looking in. I would go to his house, and him and his mom were speaking in Russian. I had no idea. And this was years, right? Like my entire college career. All of our friends, not all, but most of our friends, like New Year's parties in the summer, we'd go to this cabin for like a long weekend, and they're all speaking in Russian, and I'm just over here having no idea what's going on. So I just had this pattern at every step of my life. I could tell countless stories where I was just, sometimes I put myself there, but on the outside looking in, right? So there's that. I'll come back to that then. But I was always curious about faith from a distance. I wasn't raised in a religious household. We didn't go to church. It wasn't off limits. Like I went with friends sometimes. There was a period in middle school when my uncle, he got out of prison and he started going to this church, and I went with him. And even sitting in that church in middle school, I remember just observing, being like, this is weird. Again, just this observer thing, like, what is happening? Why are so many people interested in this? But I still found myself hungry for it for some reason, even though I thought it was weird and I was just observing. When I was younger, I had this beginner's Bible. It's actually, I had this beginner's Bible.
I think your name's in it, isn't it?
Yeah, to Samantha from Pappy Keith and Grammy Barb, 1997. So I was like 6 years old when I got this. And I read this thing probably 20 times through. Again, just curious. I was in elementary, 97, 6. That's like first grade, second grade. And I would just read it over and over and over again. And my extended family, especially on my dad's side, they were very religious, which is why my grandmother bought me a Bible. She probably thought I was a heathen and needed to read the word of God, right? So I would sit in my room and read this, again, observing. I wasn't getting caught up in it. I wasn't participating in it. I was observing, like, why does my extended family care so much about a burning bush? You really think somebody was swallowed by a whale? What are you talking? This is crazy. I remember thinking, you people are insane. I didn't get it, right? Didn't get it. And then fast forward. So again, this whole story has to do with achievement and isolation, right? So as an observer, I was kind of isolated. I still have the personality trait where if left to my default and unchecked, I would just retreat. I would like be a monastic nun or something, right? I would just live a life of the mind and never be around people. Not healthy. I'm not doing that. But so let's talk about achievement a little bit, because those are the two themes here. I was surrounded by athletic excellence as a child. One of my best friends growing up was Olympic level in her sport of choice. My brothers were very good wrestlers, like national level. Their names are on the 100 win things in our high school. Like, not just like, oh, they're good, but like top tier good. So it's hard to know where my story begins and theirs ends. And I would never want to tell their story, but I will just say that throughout my life, I saw athletic excellence up close, which means I got to see the underbelly of excellence. Do you know what I mean? There's a cost to it. There's a shadow side to being really good at something, and I got to witness that. And I remember being in high school, and my brother, it was a wrestling match, my brother Charlie. This match was important for some reason. It got him to states or Eastern Nationals or something like that. And it looked like he was about to lose, which was a big deal. And then he stood up, and you could see something. I remember this plain as day. Something in him shifted, like this, like, I'm gonna do it. There were only a few seconds left, and he pinned the person and won. And everybody went crazy, right? And this parent, who I will leave unnamed in my life, who was a family friend of ours, was sitting behind me, leaned forward, right? So this is one of these moments that informed my faith in a weird way. I just didn't know it yet. And he said, Sam, why aren't you competitive like that? And you know how sometimes in life, there's just these moments of intense clarity, just this deep knowing. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was rhetorical. Yes, I do.
So
Yeah.
I just had this moment of intense clarity of like, oh, so I played sports. I swam. I was captain of the swim team. I ran track. I played basketball. I did all the stuff. I didn't care. Like if somebody ran by me in track, it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna win. I didn't have that competitive nature with sports. It came out elsewhere, but not with sports. I just didn't care. And I had this intense moment of clarity of like, oh, there's another way to live that has nothing to do with conquering, competition, winning. There's another path, and that's the path I want to be on. But I didn't have the language for it yet. I just had this moment of clarity. I think I was in 10th. I might have actually been like 11th or 12th grade because my brothers were in high school at that point. So I think I was a senior. And I just remember thinking, this adult is trying to hand me shame that I'm not as athletically competitive as my brothers. But I'm not going to pick that shame up because I actually feel this profound sense that there's another way to be. There's another posture towards life. And I just had this like, oh, everybody else thinks this is the thing. Winning is the thing. But because I was surrounded by athletic excellence with my friend and my brothers, I knew that like, you don't even know the costs of all of this. And again, I think it's okay to be competitive, but there's another way. And that's the way I want to go. Fast forward, I went to college, my senior year of college. I was sitting in an anthropology class because I was an anthropology student. And the professor said, I'm going to teach you something today to make you all successful in your anthropology careers. And this classmate of mine, I wish I knew her name because another moment of transformation that informed my faith. I just didn't know it yet. This is all going to come together then. She raised her hand and she said, well, what do you mean by success? And I remember Dr. Schlegel, my professor, she erased the board. It was a chalkboard. This is like 20 years ago.
It was a chalkboard.
She erased the chalkboard and she said, we're not going to talk about what we were going to talk about today. We're going to talk about success. What is success? She went through all of these cultures throughout history and currently on the earth and how they measure success. For some cultures, success is about health. In our culture, it's often about money and employment. For some people, it's about a general like closeness to the community, like success. And that was the first time an adult, I mean, I know I was 22 and I was 21 and a senior in college, but an adult framed success as something that wasn't about conquering, competing, winning, money, riches, fame, employment, right? It was the first time where I'm like, oh, like successes, which is crazy. I was 21 and I was playing the game of like, I'm going to make money. And then I thought, oh, again, just a reminder, this moment of clarity, a reminder, almost like this whispering voice of there's another path that you can be on. You don't have to play this game of winning, of conquering, of achievement. So it's just this other deep moment of clarity of like, oh, I can jump ship. I can play another game. I don't have to play this one, right? And then again, of course, like we all do, I forgot. And I played the game. I was married before Dillon, so I got married. We had a big house. We had a yard. I had a bunch of degrees. I was doing volunteer work for I was on like 3 boards, 7 committees, volunteering 12 hours a week, teaching people, helping people who couldn't afford to do their taxes. I was doing their taxes for them through an organization for free. And then I had a full-time job and 2 part-time jobs. It was insanity. I was on some kind of tour to prove something to someone. I don't know. It was crazy. I was playing the status game, right? I was doing the achievement stuff. And the whole time, I found myself curious. Yeah, I accidentally pushed a button. I found myself curious about faith the whole time, but nobody wanted to go to church with me. And going to church as an adult for the first time by yourself is terrifying. I wasn't brave enough to do it, so I didn't. But then I found myself, for a lot of reasons outside the scope of this episode, 28 and divorced. And then I met Dillon. We became friends for a while. And then later on, we started dating. But him and I went to some churches together. I will say that charismatic churches, where people are like in the air like this singing, and there's a praise band and there's a 40-minute sermon, that environment is way too overstimulating for me to feel safe. Because for me to feel safe, I need to observe for a couple years. And maybe then I'll enter into it. I don't know if that's right or wrong. It just is, and I can't really do much about it at this point. It's pretty wired. Um, and you can't observe in those situations because it's just too overstimulating for me, right? I needed something slower. So we found a home in the Lutheran church. And Dillon was confirmed in a Lutheran and UCC church. That wasn't new for him, but it was new for me. And I love mainline Protestantism. I like liturgy. I need a calm nervous system because that is the only place I can meet God. That hyped up stuff that has its place for other people. For me, it just activates something. There's too much distraction for me to meet God in a worship service. You know what I mean? So that wasn't for me. Again, back to this achievement and isolation stuff. For me, it felt isolating in those loud churches, in those like a lot of emotional displays in those churches really made me feel unsafe and really made me feel like I couldn't watch. I couldn't observe. And if I can't observe for a little bit, then I'll never be able to participate ever, right? It's just this constant, there was a barrier. So I started going to a Lutheran church and I realized this was the first community. I'm sure they exist elsewhere, but for me, this was the first community where people were honest. When you said, "How are you?" at church, people didn't do what they do in the world, where they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." They were honest. They talked about the grief, the death, the diagnosis, the divorce. They said it. They said the thing. They were like, having a really hard time. My mother died 7 years ago, and a lot is coming up for me right now. I'm just having a really hard time. How beautiful. That was revolutionary for me because all the places and spaces I come from, you don't do that. You don't do that. And I loved it. And so with that, I really liked the church community. And I wanted more of this because for me, this honesty that came with church was the antidote to my achievement status oriented self, right? So I was hungry for it. It like canceled out this need for me to strive and to do more and to, even within Christianity, some communities you can find this, like you need to do the right thing, believe the right thing, say the right thing, say the right prayer, and then you're saved. That doesn't work for me because the whole world is me having to do the right thing, say the right thing, be the right thing. Church for me in our Lutheran churches, thank goodness, has always been a place where like, oh, I can just be here and it's all right. Now, the Jesus story for me at this point, I was hooked on church, but the Jesus story for me felt so lofty and distant and unattainable because people would throw around words like, Jesus is the Son of God, our Lord and Savior. Salvation comes through him. What? Or what? I spent years again observing and like participating and then observing again. I'm like, what? Like I had this distance. I would go to church, but I had this distance. And because I'm not afraid to show up as my full self, I would aggressively ask questions at different groups. And especially like St. Paul's and Enola, those people were so kind to me because I was in the thick of like, what the hell is going on in this Christianity thing? Tell me, help me. And they let me. They let me just be like, what are you talking about? And they would try. They were so kind to me and so formative for me. So then I started reading about the Roman Empire, and that I can't possibly give a testimony without talking about that. I started reading about the Roman Empire, and if you've listened to all our episodes, you already know it grounded the story for me, and it made me realize. I'm going to talk about the Easter story, right? So I hope that can you see, Dillon, the through line and the isolation and the achievement of all of this, right? So church for me.
Yes, but you're also my wife, and we talk about this. Yeah.
I feel like this can feel like I'm going all over the place, but in my mind and heart, it's all parallel. I have this, I think a lot of us do. I'm all alone. I'm like, community is nothing for me. I'm all alone, and I need to achieve and have status in this world. And church was the antidote to that. And then I started really getting into the Jesus story. And for others, it's different. Like they're swapped, right? A lot of people, it's the Jesus story, then church. For me, it was church and then the Jesus story. And I don't even like to separate them because for me, they just go hand in hand, right? Church is the Jesus story, especially if you go to a liturgical church because of all the stuff with first century, yada, yada. But the Easter story for me, when I really started to live into Lent, and especially like the Easter weekend, death, descent, rising. So I started to learn all this stuff. I really lived into the Easter story, right? Jesus died, he descended to the depths, and then he rose. First the death, then the rising. There's no other way to be transformed. And when I pictured Jesus coming in on a donkey into Jerusalem, where he knew the people with power who wanted to kill him were, that extreme radical surrender to the powers that be, that letting go of control, I'm sold. I'm sold on the Jesus story. Give me all of it. And I was already sold, but then I became a mother. And when I was sick, I had something called hyperemesis gravidarum. I was very sick, throwing up every 20 minutes for 7 months. It was awful, as Dillon knows, awful. Both of my pregnancies, worst months. I'm not somebody, thankfully, who struggles with depression, but about 7 months of both of my pregnancies, Dillon had to like come in and open the shades and be like, you got to get out of bed today. It was god awful. And during that time, I was being transformed into a mother. And that illness, I can see it now, helped me surrender to any notion of control over my body, over my time, over my mood, over whatever that I thought I had. And I really clung to the Jesus story during that time of like, Jesus surrendered to his suffering. He had nails in his limbs and he was still saying, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know. So I can surrender to this. I can surrender to it. I can surrender to the suffering because I know the Jesus story. And I see that story everywhere. We see it whenever the trees their leaves are dying, right? They change colors, they die, and then the leaves come back, right? The pattern to everything that transforms, which is everything, is first it dies and then it descends to the depths and then it rises, right? And what I found, especially in motherhood, is whenever you die to your old identity and then you descend to your darkness, right? Descend to hell is another way to put it, but you descend into the dark parts of you. And remember the Jesus story. He descends to the depths and he frees everybody. When you descend to your own darkness and figure out, why am I so angry? Why am I so pissed off? Why am I so jealous? Why am I so status oriented? You can't help but free other people from your anger, from your lack of forgiveness. Do you know what I mean? Am I saying that well enough?
Oh yeah.
So this death, descent, rising is a pattern that I just live in. I'm so consumed by it. And Jesus modeled it for us in human divine form, but it's everywhere. And I can't live another way now. When I feel an old part of me dying, I just let it now, right? And when I became a mother, when I first started going to church, my friends had opinions. They're like, oh, you're changing, right? And when I started this Jesus story thing, it helped me be like, yeah, I am. People didn't want Jesus to go into Jerusalem. His disciples were like, no, what are you doing? I'll fight them for you. Yeah, he knew that something was about to change and he allowed it anyway, even when people didn't get it. So for me, a lot of it is about letting go of the status thing. I still have it a little bit. And about participating, right? So whenever I feel myself, so this is where church comes in. When I feel myself wanting to do the lamb's ear on the playground thing, just retreat and watch from a distance, I go further in because that's the only place that I find healing and that I find the good stuff and that I connect to the Jesus story is when I go in. So I've joined a couple committees at church. I go to events. I do the thing without being status oriented. There's a line without being like, I'm going to do all of it. Right? Like I have something to prove. I can work so hard. Look at me. I'm so impressive. But just going into all of it. And then I dip in and out of observing and participating now. Just a couple more things and then I'm done. Is Dillon's a pastor. I'm married to a pastor. Dillon and I have been having conversations. There's this weird thing that pulls me back into observer. I've been a participant in Christianity for years. I haven't been an observer for years. I'm in it. I'm in it. I'm sold. I'm drinking the juice. I'm here. However, Dillon gets calls multiple times a week of devastating things. He's the first person to know a lot of things, right? And they're not secrets, right? They eventually come out, but he's the first line of defense. And like people have a terrible diagnosis. People who we know and love in our church, they call Dillon. People die or they're in the hospital, they call Dillon. within minutes of it happening, Dillon knows. He's pushed into the inner circle. But because Dillon has to go to the hospital and somebody needs to know where he's at, I then know. And then usually it's the next day that everybody else knows, but I know a lot of stuff right away, right? Dillon gets to go, I think of it like Revolutionary War time period. Like, not that I'm a general or in charge, but like the general was on a horse in the back watching the battle. And it's like I watched Dillon get this news. He looks back and tells me, and then he charges in and he's like boots on the ground and he gets to do something with that energy. But I just observe. So I'm pushed back into that lamb's ear on the playground observing mode. I don't get to do anything. I don't get to go hold the hand of the dying person. I'm not even sure that I would want to, but I don't get to do anything with that energy except observe him do it. But then I have all this grief. It's weird to live in a home with a pastor because almost every phone call is devastating news and it's emotional. And Dillon gets to take that emotion and go do something with it. Not that it's a privilege, it's still difficult for him. I'm not trying to say like, oh, he's so lucky. That's not what I'm saying. But I have all this observer energy that is often very harmful to me to be an observer, because I don't want to be an observer of life. I want to participate, right? But it's just a weird thing that kind of pulls me out of it sometimes. And observing for me has a lot to do with thinking. And I've come to realize that God is where thinking stops. So if I want to experience God more, I have to quiet this. And I'm a very thinking person. It's very, and not in an anxious way, just in like an observer way, right? So for me, this is the last thing. All of this is to say that my observer stuff, my isolation stuff, my achievement stuff, God for me is not an escape plan, but instead is about being fully embodied in motherhood, in the church community, in wherever I am. It's about being fully embodied, not being somewhere else, not being an individual, but about being part of the community, which is why I struggle with things like this being so personal, because for me, it's all very much communal. It's a slow burn. Christianity has not been this like, here's the moment, here, I'm a Christian now. It's been a real slow burn. And it has always involved me participating rather than observing and me loosening my grip on achievement. There you go. Did that make any sense?
Oh, it was good. Oh,
Okay.
it was lovely. It was vulnerable. It was lovely. It had a good through line.
And maybe this is nostalgic for some people.
It's actually nostalgic for me, honestly. But
Now, can I show you that now I have, like, you can see right here, sort of, those are flowers that Dillon bought me when we were dating that I flattened. I had them all over from Dillon.
Oh, that's sweet. No,
All right,
that was just so that was very good and very personal and very meaningful. So I guess I have to go now.
And again, everybody, we're doing this because we really want to show that there's a way to talk about your faith that isn't proselytizing and isn't, you need to believe what I believe or else you're going to suffer forever. There's a way to do this that is loving, that is true to yourself and is as unique as you are, right? And I think it's important. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. So as Samantha has said, the testimonies are very difficult for me. I'm personally, I struggle with them. And as many of you know, or all of you know, I'm a pastor and I tell the stories of the church and I teach the stories of the church and I love them deeply. I always have. And but my own journey is a little bit different. And so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my own personal faith journey today, my journey with Jesus, as I'll call it. So here we go.
You can do.
I was brought up in a rural area, somewhat around here. I won't give full details, but I was brought up in a rural area, and I was brought up by a wonderful family. I might get a little emotional actually here. Um, a wonderful mother, a wonderful father. I have a younger brother, and on my maternal side, my mother's side, there was some religious conflict, in that I didn't think this would happen. In that,
You'd be emotional?
yeah, probably not. In that, my grandfather, my mother's mother, in the 70s, joined a more not very well known religious group. And my grandmother did not join with him. She found an evangelical understanding of Christianity. She fell into the very much born again movement, and she went from being a mainline Christian who attended a UCC church, to finding Jesus in a new way in her 40s, and having a born again experience and joining a moderately general evangelical church. And my grandfather remained in this more kind of exclusive religious group called Armstrongism. And from the 70s onward, this created a division, and it created deep fear in my mother's side. In that there was religious division in the household. My grandfather no longer celebrated holidays, and so therefore the family won't either. And they had to do these things on the side, and there was always this fear of, well, is one going to be safe? Does God love my grandfather, or does God love my grandmother? And what's going to happen with the kids? And it's interesting because my grandmother on my mom's side didn't really grow up overly religious. She was baptized. I think she went to Sunday school. But my grandfather did grow up religious, both in general mainline churches. And it wasn't until later that they both found these two different paths, which divided my mom's family. So when I was born in 1991, my grandfather was still alive at that time. And from almost inception on, as I grew up, I realized that both faiths that they had, the more evangelical Christian born again faith of my grandfather and or my grandmother, and the more kind of alternative faith that my grandfather had, were at odds with each other. And it was made clear in our family. And so my faith journey from kind of then on has been one of stability. I have always looked for stability because there was instability in a faith that was rooted almost in fear of whether or not this person was safe, whether or not they were going to go to heaven, whether or not Jesus really loved them. And so there was a lack of stability there, and there was a missing of God's ultimate love that transforms all things. And so I grew up with this instability and this division. I was raised in church from very early on. I went to Sunday school. I was in church Christmas pageants. I sang the hymns. I took communion. I was baptized. I was confirmed. I did all of those things. And yet, throughout some of the early days of my life, there was issues with well, if the pastor wasn't very good, we'll try another church, or we'll just stop going for a little bit and we'll try another church. So this brought the instability that was in the very beginning, and either stop going or trying something different really kind of messed with the stability of what a church community could be. And so there was that volatile couple of years in my early days that kind of once again kind of reinforced this division, this separation, this God that was a God of fear, and this idea that there was a separation between people who were married. I was thinking about my grandparents, and so that had led me to having a conversation with my parents when I was probably a preteen or almost a teenager. Of I need some stability. I want to be with my friends and yada yada. So we went back to my parents' childhood church. Well, not necessarily my dad's, but my mom's, which was a federated church of the Lutheran and UCC traditions. And my brother and I, for most of our middle school and high school, that was our church. That was where we spent most of our time and learned the faith. That pastor who was there at that church at that time is now my colleague, which is very ironic. And I appreciate him very much, seeing him first as a pastor, and now as a colleague. And it was there at that church, my mother's childhood church, that where she was confirmed and baptized, that I received First Holy Communion, actually.
Was your dad too confirmed there?
My dad was baptized and received First Holy Communion in the Catholic Church.
But wasn't he confirmed?
Yes, I think he was confirmed in the Lutheran Church. I'm almost positive he was.
But the same church that you were confirmed in?
Yes.
And your mom was, yeah.
Yes, Zion Stone, church. And so I fell in love with I was with my friends, number one. There was stability in there that we went. And I fell in love with the service, honestly, because I knew what to expect when I went to church. I knew that there was going to be stability there. And I knew that there was going to be a message of God that was constant, that God is a God of grace and love and inclusion. And when we would, recite the creeds together, or pray the Lord's Prayer together, or we would sing the hymns together, or we would read the psalm together, those moments of the service, seeing everyone come up for communion or to take it all at the same time, those were moments of collectiveness that I could place my faith on and see that in these moments, God and Jesus Christ is coming to not only me, but the community. And that brought stability to me. And I really, really, I loved that. It helped me heal from the wounds of my past, which I still struggle with, I'll let you know. The wounds of my past of division and fear and separation. Those things, in particularly the Lutheran and UCC faith, the mainline Protestantism generally, gave me a sense of, I can get on board with a God like this, who brings continuity, who brings not conditionalism but unconditionalism, a God that is deeply a God of grace, that I don't have to earn anything to do anything, but that God loves me for who I am and loves the community and calls us back every single time when we mess up. That was good for me. It wasn't this God of fear and separation of whether or not I have to worry about, is this person safe or is that person safe? What ended up happening is then I graduated well, let me say this actually. I got very, very involved. My brother did too, to a certain extent, but to a little bit lesser extent than I did. When I was at Zion Stone growing up, I was very active. I stayed on after being confirmed and baptism and all of that stuff, and I stayed on and I was very active in the youth group. I became the president of the youth group, and we would participate in Youth Sunday, which usually would take effect where the whole youth group, which was very active at that time, we would lead the service. And 1 year I was able to preach. They assigned me to preach, and that was a game changer for me. I enjoyed putting all the stuff together. I enjoyed preaching it. I think I was a junior or a senior at that time, and that sparked interest in me um, to uh, to share my faith and to share the faith of my ancestors at a very high pulpit. This is the church that I was in was a very old, from the 1700s, 1800s, where the pulpit's real high, and it was kind of fun, and that allowed me to kind of solidify that I don't have to be in fear, that I don't have to, I don't have, that God is not a God of divisions. These people are over here and these people are over here, but that God works in many different ways through many different people, and gives the same message and really lifts people up. That gave me much hope. It still does today. And so I went off to college and I worked for a while, and I started to attend different churches because I was no longer living in this area. And so I went to all different types of churches, even churches that were not Christian. I'd go to the Jewish synagogue. I went to a Buddhist temple. I went to with a friend of mine who was Muslim from college. I went with him and a couple buddies to a Muslim prayer service that was very beautiful in Harrisburg. I went to a UU church, a Unitarian Universalist. I tried all of it and really had a great experience. And what happened was, I started helping teach GED classes. I was fresh out of college, and it was at a Presbyterian church in downtown Harrisburg, and that was a game changer for me. Number one, it was the first time that I ever saw a woman on a staff of a church. I always knew there were women pastors, but it was the first time that I saw. I never heard her preach, and never went to one of the services, but just that there was a woman on staff at this Presbyterian church was great. I didn't attend the Presbyterian church regularly. I'd go from time to time, and I liked it. But I attended the Episcopal church for a very long time, in which there was a woman priest there. And her and I got along very well, and it was a great congregation. And I really loved that Episcopal church. And I served on their board, and I did different things and activities, and I loved it. It was a very inclusive place. And so all these moments in my life helped me understand once again that God can be a God of stability and not separation. And when I started teaching the GED courses and facilitating them, I saw many people who I didn't have the opportunity to be around for the most part, people that were deeply struggling in their life. and I saw what the church was doing to help them become more literate and educating them so that they could seek employment, that they could help their families, that they could really get a step up in life, take care of their children. And I saw that the church was doing this, which got me to link up what the church was doing with the teachings of Jesus. And so for me, I know that I don't have to earn God's love. I'm pretty good with that. But sharing God's love with people through action and giving people God's grace through services like teaching GED courses or collecting clothes and doing coat distributions or feeding the hungry, that's where I see Jesus in the world. And that is very personal to me. I try to put those things into action by doing those things and supporting those things. And so for me, Jesus and Jesus's teachings are very personal in that what I try to live out is where I see Jesus in the world and in my own life. I do want to share this. When I attended seminary, I was introduced to this poem. I don't even know if Samantha knows this, but I was introduced to this poem the second year of seminary by my systematics professor, who used to quote poetry. She would quote poetry from memory. And I found that very engaging. And she once quoted, in part, this poem from Francis Thompson, who was an English mystic and a Roman Catholic from England, and it's called The Hound of Heaven. And it's rather long. It's a 182-line poem. I'm not going to read it. And she only memorized it in part. But it's this. This is the premise of The Hound of Heaven. That wherever we may go in life, the hound...
Is this from the poem?
Yes.
Okay.
Wherever we may go in life, God is like a hound with a nose that will follow you wherever you may run, like a bunny rabbit that may run underneath the brush, up over the hill, into the hole, down into the meadow. There's no escaping the love of God. You may want to wander off, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, God's love remains, and it looks different. There's different kinds of rabbits. There's different kinds of birds.
Is this still from the poem?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And God will walk with you and find you all over the place. And that to me takes me back to my very early days of an understanding of being told in a very general way that some family, because they believe a little bit differently than we do, that God doesn't accept them.
Such a good poem.
And that they're going to be separated. And so for me, God comes to us in Jesus and takes on our human form and experiences a life like we do. And that is very personal to me. I can get on board with a God who comes in Jesus just like me and experiences that. Jesus, for me, is transformational in his teachings, which help me act in the world. That's very deeply personal. I put on the teachings of Jesus by sharing that and trying to live out Jesus's teachings in my personal life. And when it comes to understanding where people are in life, I always go back to that poem, The Hound of Heaven, that was written in the 1800s, that wherever we may find ourselves or go, God's always with us and is never going to leave us. If you think about a hunting hound, the hunting hound never gives up on what it wants, on what it's after, on what it cares about, and what it loves. And God, to me, is indeed like that hunting hound that will go with us always. And for people in my family who I once thought I would never see again, that gives me great hope. And so for me, Jesus is deeply personal, and his teachings are personal to me in that I share them with others. I try in my best way. And having a theology of an inclusive God, which is deeply rooted in the mainline Protestant traditions, has allowed me to be in a place of stability and not wanting necessarily to always have to wander around. It has allowed me to be on a firm footing. And as the poem says, in a meadow where the flowers always come up. And so that's my story. That's my personal story.
It's so good. And what's so interesting is that Nadia Bolz-Weber, other people I've heard, I wasn't even raised in church, and yet my story of Christianity began when I was a child. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Which is like people's childhood, and it makes me think of our two girls who are 3 and 4 right now. I mean, they're being raised by a pastor, so I'm sure, and somebody who studies religious language, so I'm sure that they're already being formed in ways that we won't know for a couple decades. But so interesting how my story started when I was young, which informed, I mean, just starting with me being on the outside looking in with my siblings has shaped my faith, and your stuff, even generations before you, shaped your faith. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did it.
I did it. You did it. You did it. You did it. You did it. Yeah.
Well, there we have it. So don't be afraid to share it a little bit.
Yeah, don't be afraid to share your
wild.
Share where you're. I know Samantha doesn't like the word journey all the time, but share what God has and continues to. Those personal stories matter, and they're sometimes difficult to share, including.
And you got to share with the willing. Don't share with the forced.
Oh well, yeah.
Right.
Don't stand. Well, no, I'm not even. No, I'm not going to say what I was going to say. But
all right, stay curious.
Stay curious.
To understand the mystery, first take a look at the history. The words we